The air in courtroom 3B of the Redding County Superior Court was the color of weak coffee and smelled of old paper and stale anxiety. It was a room built for the methodical dismantling of lives, a beige box where justice was weighed out in billable hours and procedural minutiae. On this Tuesday morning, the case of Miller versus Omnicorp was droning on, a tedious contractual dispute that had put the jury in a state of near hibernation. Presiding over it all was the Honorable Judge Marcus Harrison, a man whose silver hair and stern jawline were as much a part of his judicial uniform as his black robes. He ran his courtroom with the unyielding authority of a man who hadn't been told no in 2 decades. In the back row of the gallery, a man sat perfectly still, an island of black leather in a sea of polyester suits and nervous cotton blouses. He was out of place, and he knew it. So did everyone else. His jeans were faded from thousands of miles pressed against a hot engine, his boots scuffed and heavy. A thick, gray-streaked ponytail was tied at the nape of his neck, revealing tattoos that crept up from his collar like dark ivy. Over his leather vest, a 3-piece patch identified him as a member of the Road Brotherhood, a club whose name conjured images of highways and dust, not depositions and discovery. He watched the proceedings with a placid, unnerving calm, his gaze missing nothing. "The plaintiff calls its next character witness to the stand," announced the plaintiff's young, visibly sweating lawyer, a Mr. Gable. "We call Hawk." A ripple went through the courtroom. Jurors straightened up. The Omnicorp lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Davies with a predator's smile, leaned over to his paralegal and whispered something that made her smirk. Judge Harrison looked down from his bench, his eyes scanning the gallery until they landed on the man in leather. A sigh, barely audible but heavy, with theatrical impatience, escaped his lips. He consulted his docket as if to confirm this unfortunate reality. "The court calls Hawk." The judge pronounced the name as if it were a piece of evidence he was holding with tongs. The man stood. He was taller than he looked sitting down, broad-shouldered and solid. He moved with an economy of motion, no wasted energy, and started the long walk down the center aisle toward the witness box. "Sir," Judge Harrison's voice cut through the room, sharp and imperious, every eye fixed on the biker. "Sir, a moment. This is a court of law. I trust you are aware that there is a standard of decorum and, frankly, a dress code. While I will not delay these proceedings by sending you home to find a tie, I will remind you that your conduct here will be scrutinized. You will show this institution the respect it is owed. Please approach the bench, and do so quietly." The rebuke was public, deliberate, and designed to diminish. It was a clear signal to the jury. This is not a man to be taken seriously. Davies's smirk widened into a grin. The biker, Hawk, gave no visible reaction. He simply stopped, gave the judge a short, single nod, and continued his silent approach. He looked less like a man being chastised and more like a boulder being informed of the existence of rain. He reached the bar, waiting to be sworn in, when Davies shot to his feet. "Your Honor, before the witness is sworn, the defense would like to make a motion in limine." Judge Harrison nodded, looking pleased by the return to familiar legal sparring. "Proceed, Mr. Davies." "Your Honor, we move to exclude the entirety of this witness's testimony," Davies began, his voice smooth and confident. "Pursuant to the recent 4th District Appellate ruling in People v. Chen, testimony from a witness whose relationship to the plaintiff is primarily personal and unsubstantiated by professional interaction can be deemed prejudicial. Its probative value far outweighed by its potential to confuse the jury or introduce improper character evidence. It was a surgical strike. A complex, obscure procedural argument dropped like a bomb. Gable, the plaintiff's young lawyer, looked as if he'd been slapped. He flipped frantically through his legal pad, his face paling. He had clearly never heard of People versus Chen. Davies knew it. The judge knew it. The case was about to be gutted, and the man who was supposed to save it hadn't even been sworn in. Judge Harrison looked down at Gable, his expression a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Counselor," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "do you have any response to Mr. Davies's motion? Anything at all to prevent me from granting it?" Gable opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He stammered, his eyes wide with panic. He was a minnow in a tank with a shark, and he was bleeding. The judge's gavel was already halfway raised, ready to fall and effectively end the plaintiff's chances. From beside the witness stand, a voice low and calm as erosion cut through the tension. "Your Honor." Every head turned. It was Hawk. He hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice, but his two words had seized control of the room. Judge Harrison's face darkened with fury. The man he had just publicly admonished was now daring to interrupt him. "Witness, you will be silent," he snapped. "You are not to speak until you are sworn in and asked a direct question. That is not your place. One more outburst and I will have you removed and held in contempt." Hawk didn't flinch. He met the judge's glare with an unblinking, steady gaze. "I apologize for the procedural misstep, Your Honor," he said, his tone still perfectly even. "However, the circumstances are unusual. I am not merely a witness in this matter." Davies let out a short, derisive laugh. "Oh, here we go." The judge leaned forward, his knuckles white on his gavel. "And what precisely are you suggesting you are?" "I am suggesting," Hawk said, "that I have the right to respond to a motion that directly impacts my own testimony. I am appearing pro se." The term hung in the air. Pro se. Representing oneself, a right every citizen had, but one that judges universally loathed, as it usually meant dealing with rambling, incompetent litigants. "You are representing yourself?" the judge asked, his voice thick with disbelief. "As a witness? That is a legal absurdity." "Not as a witness, Your Honor. As a party with a vested interest in the proceedings, called to testify, and as counsel of record for that party." "Counsel of record?" Judge Harrison's voice rose. "Sir, I have had enough of these games. You are not an officer of the court. You are not an attorney. This is not a television drama where a surprise lawyer emerges from the gallery. You will cease this charade immediately, or I will make you regret ever setting foot in this courthouse. Do you understand me?" The bailiff took a half step forward, sensing the imminent explosion. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keys, ready to document the charge of contempt. Hawk gave another slow, deliberate nod. "I understand your skepticism, Your Honor. It is perhaps warranted by my appearance." For the first time, a flicker of something, not humor but a dry, knowing irony, touched his eyes. "For the court's record, my name is John T. Hawkins." He moved with painstaking slowness, reaching inside his leather vest. The bailiff's hand went to his sidearm. Hawk ignored him, his movements telegraphing no threat. He pulled out a worn black leather wallet, flipped it open, and extracted a thin, dog-eared plastic card. He held it out for the clerk. "State Bar of California, number 188753, he said, the numbers rolling off his tongue as if he were reciting an old address. "Admitted to practice, June 1996. Juris Doctor, Stanford University School of Law. Graduated with honors, Order of the Coif." The courtroom fell into a silence so profound it felt like a pressure drop. Davies's smug expression had frozen, then melted from his face. The jury was leaning forward as one, their boredom vaporized. The young lawyer, Gable, was staring at Hawkins as if he'd just sprouted wings. The court clerk, a woman who had seen everything, took the card. Her eyes, magnified by her reading glasses, darted from the card to the man in the leather vest. She turned to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. The entire room watched her screen as if it were an oracle. After a few seconds, she stopped. She looked up at Judge Harrison, her face a mask of professional neutrality, and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the confirmation the judge needed. The change in Harrison's demeanor was a tectonic shift. The overt hostility vanished, replaced by a rigid, almost brittle professionalism. The arrogance was gone, but in its place was a deep, unsettled confusion. He had built his world on the bedrock of predictable indicators, good suits, expensive shoes, deferential tones. That bedrock had just fractured. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Mr. Hawkins," he said, the name now tasting different in his mouth. "You wish to respond to Mr. Davies's motion?" "I do, Your Honor," Hawkins replied, his voice unchanged. He still hadn't taken the stand. He didn't need to. He commanded the space from where he stood. "Proceed." Hawkins turned his head slightly, fixing his gaze on Davies. He didn't consult a single note. "Mr. Davies," he began, "cites People versus Chen, a recent and, I grant him, cleverly chosen ruling from the 4th District. His argument is that my testimony would be more prejudicial than probative. It's a fine argument as far as it goes. Unfortunately for opposing counsel, it doesn't go nearly far enough." He took a step toward the defense table, and Davies involuntarily took a step back. Counsel conveniently omits the foundational precedent on which Chen is built: Alvarado versus Superior Court. Alvarado explicitly states that such an evidentiary exclusion applies only when the testimony offered is speculative in nature, or when it lacks a direct observational basis. My testimony, as will be made clear, concerns firsthand direct observation of the verbal agreements and contractual representations made by Omnicorp to the plaintiff. I was there. I heard what was said. He paused, letting the words sink in. He wasn't just arguing the law, he was teaching it. "Furthermore," he continued, his voice resonating with quiet authority, "if counsel had been more thorough in his research, he would have discovered the very recent appellate clarification in remarriage of Dennison, which was handed down a mere 7 weeks ago. Dennison significantly narrows the application of the Chen ruling, limiting its scope almost exclusively to the introduction of unqualified expert testimony, not that of a percipient witness. As I am here today, as both a character witness and a percipient witness to the events in question, Chen is, as a matter of established case law, entirely inapplicable. The motion is not just without merit, Your Honor. With all due respect to my learned colleague, it borders on frivolous. The legal dissection was flawless, brutal, and delivered with the cold precision of a surgeon. Davies was ashen. He had walked into the courtroom with a hidden knife and had just been disarmed, dismantled, and humiliated by a man he had dismissed as a piece of scenery. He had no response. He had built his entire strategy on that one motion, on the assumption that he was the smartest man in the room. He wasn't even the smartest man at his own table. Judge Harrison stared down at the documents before him, though he wasn't really seeing them. He was seeing the man in the leather vest. He was replaying his own words, his condescending tone, his dismissal of this man's very presence. The record would not show his contempt, but he could feel the memory of it burning in his own ears. He looked at the clerk. who gave another small nod. The law was exactly as Hawkins had stated it. The court has considered the argument, Judge Harrison said, his voice a flat monotone, betraying nothing of the turmoil beneath. Mr. Hawkins is correct in his analysis. The motion to exclude is denied. He looked toward the witness box. Mr. Hawkins, you may take the stand. John T. Hawkins was sworn in. His testimony was a model of clarity and restraint. He laid out the facts of the case, describing meetings he'd witnessed and conversations he'd overheard. He spoke without embellishment or emotion, building the plaintiff's case brick by solid, undeniable brick. When Davies rose to cross-examine him, his earlier swagger was gone, replaced by a cautious, hesitant approach. He tried to poke holes, to twist words, to impeach credibility based on Hawkins's affiliation with a motorcycle club. Hawkins met every question with the same unshakable calm. He never got angry. He never took the bait. He answered the question that was asked, and only the question that was asked, giving Davies no leverage, no openings, no ground. It was a masterful performance, and by the time Davies finally gave up and said, "No further questions, Your Honor," the jury's